you have this incredible framework that you use when you're coaching people on relationships using 4 levels. It's called the 4 levels of a relationship. Can you explain it?
Level 1, admiration. Level 2 is mutual attraction. Level 3 is commitment. Level 4 is compatibility.
I love this concept and this framework because if you don't know what level you're in, no wonder your relationship isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go through these levels one by one and really break them down.
Let me start with this. Level 1 is just admiration. That's when you see someone, you may even see them from afar. They may not know you exist, but there's something you admire about them. You think they're attractive, hot, impressive, whatever it may be, compelling. Now, on its own, not important. The person they're not attracted to you. This is completely unrequited. There's nothing important about it. It's just you having decided that someone is an impressive, wonderful, or just attractive person. Then there's level 2. Level 2 is mutual attraction.
Okay.
Now, this is when two people find chemistry, a connection. There's a shared attraction between them. Now, this is perhaps the most dangerous level because when we get attracted to someone, which, by the way, for many of us, we feel like doesn't happen nearly often enough, and then we find that that person is attracted back, we feel like we found the Holy Grail.
Yes.
Like, this is it. It feels like an explosion.
Yes.
It's like, oh my God, this is the most important thing in the world. I have to do everything for this thing.
Yes. So this is level 2, and
Level
this is
2.
dangerous. Why is this dangerous?
Because on its own, it's not that important. A connection is not the rarest thing in the world.
That's true.
Sexual chemistry is not the rarest thing in the world, but it feels when you find it like it's so important. But we realize it's not important when we get to level 3. Level 3 is commitment. 2 people actually saying yes to each other. You know, the number of people that I speak to that start with, I have this amazing person in my life. They're this, they're that, they're the other. They're, you know, Matt, you, this person that we can talk about anything. We have the most amazing time together. And I already know there's a huge but coming. Otherwise, it wouldn't start with all of this amazing stuff. And the punchline often is some form of, but they don't want a relationship. But they say they're not ready. But they're confused about me. And it's like, okay, so we're in level 2. We're not in level 3. And there's a world of difference between those two places. Level 2 is a plot of land. It may look like a plot of land that's in a great part of town, or it looks over a lake, or it's in an amazing part of the city. It's an amazing plot of land. Oof, something amazing could go here. You meet a person and the connection, the attraction, the chemistry makes you feel like you've got an amazing plot of land. And all you can see is what could get built on that plot of land and how incredible that could be.
Yep.
But in order for that to become that, you need a builder. And the next question is, do you actually have a builder? Because when you have a builder and 2 people build together, they create something extraordinary on that land. They build their castle, whatever that castle is. And the more you build it, the more ornate it becomes, the more beautiful it becomes. It is weathered in all sorts of ways that are distinct to your relationship. There's secret rooms no one else knows about, that only the 2 of you know about. It's your castle together. That's what's beautiful. That's what makes a relationship really, really special, is all of the work that's gone into building something truly unique that only the 2 of you could have built. Now imagine the scene of you sitting there building away at this castle, and the other builder is AWOL. They're not even there. They are somewhere else because they're not trying to build with you. They're not trying to have a relationship. They just want an experience. It's a completely different thing. So level 3 is a relationship. It's commitment. Level 2 is just an experience.
This is painful. Well, I shouldn't say it's painful. I'm thinking on behalf of so many of the listeners who are single in their 20s and 30s and 40s and online dating, because I would imagine that there's a tremendous amount of confusion between level 2 and level 3. And my next question is, how the hell do you know if you're in level 3? How do you know if somebody actually wants a commitment the way that you do?
You have the conversation you're too afraid to have right now. The one that you've been putting off because it feels so good to keep enjoying this thing that you don't want to wreck it. You don't want to drive it away. You are afraid that if you have the question, you're going to be seen as difficult. So we don't say it. We're afraid of the effects. And what we think is, by the way, if I could just keep getting closer and closer and closer to this person, if I can make myself indispensable, if I can just get so close that I'm basically, integrated with their every part of their life, then essentially they'll see my value. And by the way, they'll start giving as much as I am because they'll realize my value. Unfortunately, the opposite happens is we give and we give and we give and we give, and someone learns that there's absolutely no price to pay for the giving. So everything we give gets completely taken for granted and assumed. And we come to find after months or sometimes years of being in limbo with someone, when we finally say, what is this? They're like, I don't know. And you realize you've wasted all that time and energy, all because you weren't prepared to have a hard conversation. And every great relationship is formed in the crucible of hard conversations. And a hard conversation, by the way, it doesn't have to be an aggressive or a pushy conversation. It could be a very elegant conversation. A hard conversation is just the one you're afraid to have.
That's true.
You're going to find out very quickly where you stand, and you're also introducing an element of, I'm not going to be here forever.
So let's role play. So we're in a level 2 relationship.
Yep.
And I want a commitment. I'm scared to death to ask you. I don't know how many other people you're dating. We've kind of been in that zone where we're hooking up and we're going out on dates, and I feel like it's vibing, and I don't even know what the language is anymore. That's how old I am. Do we say monogamous? Do we say exclusive? Do we say that we're like dating? Heaven forbid. Is that not a word we use? Like, I don't know. Every time I would say something to my daughter, she's like, that's how it's. I'm like, okay. I don't know what the terminology is. Anyhow, we're in a level 2. How do I bring this up with you? Can you give me the sentence, Matt?
Yeah. There are different ways to come at this, but I'll give you one way.
Yeah, let's do it.
But I realized I'm investing a lot of kind of time and energy into this, and it's an amount of time and energy and intimacy that I wouldn't be giving if we were still giving it to other people. And I know that I'm not, because it's just not me. And, I wanted to know if you're in the same place. If you're not, that's totally okay. Like, I get it. It's fine. There's no pressure. But if you're not in that place, I need to reevaluate how much I'm giving to this, because, I'm excited to meet someone, that values the same things I do or has the same things in mind that I do. And I want to give my energy to someone who's in that place. And I realize we haven't even had that conversation.
Matt, I am having a great time with you. I feel like I'm on The Bachelor right now. I am having a great time with you, but I just got out of a long-term relationship, and I don't want to hurt you.
Yeah.
I'd like to still see you, but this is why these are hard conversations. So
yeah, but that's a very real response, right? So let's keep because that's a very realistic response.
Okay.
By a lot of people. You say, look, that's totally cool. I can't keep giving my energy to someone who's not on the same page as me. Like, it's not for me. I know my energy is really precious. I know how much I have to offer someone. And if you're not in that place, it doesn't, you don't need to worry about hurting me, because I'm always going to just do what's right for me anyway. And as much as I like spending time with you, I value what I want more than that. So I'm going to do my own thing. But, I wish you the best, and you're a great guy, and it's okay. Like, I get it. You're a great person. I hope you find happiness in whatever you do, but I can't keep giving time and energy to someone who wants something different than I do.
There's a couple things I want to pull out that I think are incredibly important that I noticed, and I wonder if it was on purpose. First of all, I loved that you didn't say that you liked me. you specifically said you liked the time that we had spent together. And that left you, like playing the person that's not as interested in the level 2, I'm not ready to go to level 3. Hearing that you liked the time made you seem stronger and more confident because you weren't sounding like, hey, I really like you. Do you like me? And fishing for an answer. And then when you said, you used the word energy. You didn't use the word, I'm looking for a commitment, I'm looking for monogamy. You didn't use those words that feel like you're locking someone down. The way that the coaching went that you just gave us in the script that you can now play and you should repeat in your dating and your relationship life was one where you said, I value my energy and I know myself and I want to put my energy into things that are going somewhere. And so I want to have that conversation because this has been a lot of fun and I enjoy spending time with you, but I want to make sure that, I want to check in with you because I don't want to date a lot of other people.
And
do you see what I'm saying? You
exactly
remained
right.
powerful in that because you weren't actually looking for me to say, I like you back. You were looking for clarification on whether or not this was worth your time. And so that was super important for you listening to understand the nuance of that.
Massively different.
Yes.
Because you're having a conversation about the allocation of an incredibly valuable thing. And you're showing through the conversation how much you value it. I know what I have to give is incredible. Like that's the subtext. I know what I have to offer someone is incredible. So, I'm very careful about who I give that to. This isn't a, how dare you, hook up with me, or how dare we spend any time together if you weren't in the same. It's like, no, it's not. So quickly, I think a lot of people can lose their power that way because they don't take ownership of the time they've invested.
Yes.
Or the ways they've spent time with someone, or even the intimacy. Like you're an adult. If you want to do something with someone, do it, own it, enjoy it. But if it's no longer working for you, then don't go to resentment about the time you've spent. Instead, just take ownership of, I know what I've been giving you and what I will continue to give is incredible. I know it's really valuable. I'm deciding whether this continues to be a good investment of all of that time and energy. And if it's not any longer, that's okay. I'm not turning you into the villain, but you're
also not turning yourself into the loser. Like,
no.
I think here's the thing that's really helpful about level 1, which is, I see that person over there is super attractive, but there's nothing mutual. Level 2, which is this mutual connection and attraction and chemistry. And then if you want to try to go to level 3, which is where you have a mutual commitment, that's where you have to have the conversation and starting to understand for yourself, not where is the other person, but where am I? The second that you start to feel in a relationship where you're giving more than you're comfortable, where you're unsure of where somebody stands, where you're starting to get sketchy about stalking people in terms of legally on their, where they on, or they are on their hinge. When you're doing that, it's time to have the conversation you're avoiding, which is, this is to a point where I got to be clear about whether or not it's worth me investing energy in. Because I think we all know that point for ourselves where we tip into either super clingy, insecure, or sort of like resentful, like anger mode. Yeah. And you don't want to be there because it's not the other person's fault that they don't want to give you a commitment. It's your fault if you continue to show up to something that isn't actually good for you.
And the standard itself can actually be the thing that creates attraction. We think, we ask a lot of questions about how can we create attraction with someone. Well, one of the most amazing ways to create attraction is to have standards and to live by those standards. Let me tell you a story because you're going to love this and your audience is going to love this.
Okay, great.
This is a story from something my own wife sent to me at a time when I was not the heroic, ultra giving one in the situation.
Okay.
I was the one who was like all over the place.
Okay. By all over the place, you mean like you were like a player, so you're dating a bunch of people at the same time, or what?
We had met in London.
Okay.
I'd like literally come back for a couple of weeks to see family.
Okay.
That was where we met. Then I went back to Los Angeles where I live. We just had a great time together.
So you were level 2.
Very much level 2.
Got it. Okay.
Like deep level 2.
Well, I don't know what that means, but level 2.
Lots and lots of attraction. Absolutely no commitment.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
There is no such thing as deep level 2. Let me tell you why. There's only level 2.
This
You
is
know what I'm
exactly
saying?
the
Like
lesson.
that's it. Like
this
you're
is exactly the
right.
lesson.
You're like letting it be something. It's just level freaking 2.
Correct.
Man.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So I go back to Los Angeles and we're texting back and forth. We're having some calls. It's still fun. It's still engaging. We're excited to speak to each other. Gradually, I start to fall off.
What does fall off mean?
Like I am not
Look at the smile. It's like, you
Mel's,
dog.
day by day, my texts got less frequent. I stopped. So I probably at some point I stopped calling and started only texting.
Mm-hmm.
Then the texts are less and less frequent. And then I think, I don't know what it was, a couple of weeks, something went by where we'd already been not texting for a while. Maybe a few days went by or a couple of weeks. I can't remember. Audrey probably remembers. But at a certain point, I sent a message that said, it either said, I miss you or I'm thinking of you. She sent me a message I'll never forget. And for every woman out there, take this message and run with it because it is so powerful. It's so amazing. And it's word for word perfect. Now, bear in mind, I just want to stop for a moment. What's the instinct to do in that moment if you like someone?
I miss you too.
Yeah. Like you just rush of blood to the head, nervous system activated.
Right.
I'm just happy this person reached out
Yeah.
and that they're saying something affectionate. Like,
Yes.
Oh my God.
And this is for every human being. Like, I don't care how old you are.
Nope.
I don't care, like, gender, whatever. Like, this is, every one of us has that where if somebody's gone silent and all of a sudden you get that little boop, you're like, there it is.
And that, what you just said, is why level 2 is the most dangerous stage. Because the instinct in that moment is to text someone back.
Right.
To fly to see them, to do whatever we can to be with them. But that instinct might be the most dangerous instinct you have in that moment. So she didn't do that. She sent this message back. She said, hey, I hope you're well. To be honest, when I get a message like this from you, I don't really know what to say. So again, that's like, that first line is like confusion. She's pointing out that there's something at odds with my words and my behavior. Mm-hmm. So, hey, I hope you're well. To be honest, when you send a message like that, I don't really know what to say, or I'm not really sure what to say. We haven't really felt that close for a while now. And then she put in parentheses, rightly or wrongly, this message comes across like a bid for attention.
Whoa.
So if you break down that message,
Let's do it.
it communicates so much. And this is why I'm not someone who says like, here's 1,000 scripts, use them word for word, but you have to understand why language matters, because language matters deeply. And if you know why it works, you could say it your way, but why does it work? Well, I hope you're well. So there's still a warmth to that. It's not like, how dare you? Mm-hmm. I hope you're well. Don't wish you any harm. But when you send something like this, I'm not really sure what to say. Why? Because we haven't really felt that close for a while. So it's a little strange, the fact that we've kind of like stopped talking very much. The interactions we have are very superficial, very non-committal. There's not a lot of energy behind them. There's not much thought or intention behind them. They're more and more sparse. And then at the end of all of that, you send, I miss you. That is completely out of sync with everything you have done over the last month or not done. We haven't felt that close for a while now. Now that, again, is exposing the elephant in the room. Because what most people are hoping for in a situation like that, consciously or unconsciously, is that you will not point out the discrepancy between their actions and their words. but you will mirror them. That I'll say I miss you and you'll come back and you'll mirror that.
It's true. We do.
So she's saying, I'm not going to mirror that because that's not where we're at in reality. So I'm shining a giant spotlight on this elephant in the room. So you've got nowhere to hide. And then she said, rightly or wrongly. Now, rightly or wrongly is very powerful language there because it's also humility. She's not bringing ego into it and she's not flaring up my ego. She's like, I might be wrong.
Right.
Maybe I've misread this whole situation, but it looks an awful lot like you're not really trying, you don't want any more, and you want attention right now.
Yes.
It comes across, rightly or wrongly, like a bid for attention. Now, in that moment, I'm called out. So what do you do with that information? Well, it depends on the kind of person you're dealing with. Some people in response to that will love bomb you. Especially an unhealthy person is going to go, now I'm going to get you. So, oh my God, let me call you right now, blah, 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 charm.
Yep.
Like, let me fly out to see you this weekend. Can you come out to see me? Like goes full charm mode. I'm not going to, I didn't do that then, but there was a time in my life where I absolutely would have done that.
And just to be clear, that's still in level 2 because you haven't had the conversation, right? About the commitment.
Yes.
Because they're keeping you in level 2. I love how simple this is. That you're either attracted to somebody which is admiration that is not interested in you, or there's this level 2 dangerous mode where it is all about the attraction and the game there is to keep you in that lane.
100%.
And so you have to know for yourself, which it's very clear that your wife, Audrey, did in that moment, that I'm done with level 2. And the fact that you probably were pulling away made her realize she wanted to have something that was more certain with you if it was going to continue. And she did the thing that most of us don't do, which is she acted consistently with somebody who no longer wanted to be in level 2. She wanted to be with somebody who was willing to go to level 3 and have the commitment. And she is also smart, and I need every one of you listening to hear me. You will stay in level 2 for the rest of your damn life if you're unwilling to have the conversation about level 3.
Because no one cares about your time and your life as much as you. And expecting them to is a recipe for wasting your life. So many of my audience are not in their early 20s where it's like, well, I could throw away 5 years on a person in level 2 and, plenty of time to go. And I deal with people in their 30s, late 30s, early 40s, and many of them, their life's greatest dream is to have their own biological family. And they are in level 2 right now at risk of sacrificing, for many of them, their biggest goal, their biggest dream in the entire world for someone who I guarantee is either not going to regret having wasted all that time of yours, or even if they do, which many do, when I look back on my life, I regret wasting people's time. I don't have the power to give it back to them.
I love that we're talking about this because I have seen too many of my friends literally waste a decade with somebody. And this doesn't have to look like one night stands and dating. This could be somebody that you're living with that doesn't want to get married.
That's right.
Or who you keep thinking is going to change your mind on having children with you. And you won't have the conversation. Like the moving from level 2 to level 3 is really about the type of commitment you're looking for.
And level 2 doesn't just refer to someone who's keeping you in limbo in month 3 where they don't want a relationship and you do. It's anyone who can't give you the level of commitment that you're looking for. There are couples that have been together for 3 years and one of them deeply wants marriage, deeply wants to have a family, and the other one just cannot make up their mind or says, I really don't want this. That represents a level of commitment you need in order to be happy that someone else isn't giving you.
Whoa. That's a really important point. Because we've been focusing on dating, but you're basically saying that you could be trapped in level 2 for years because you are in a relationship justifying staying because of the attraction or whatever else, but you don't have the commitment that you deeply in your heart want.
Yeah.
Holy cow. Let's keep digging into level 2.
Yes. And the hardest conversation that you have to have is the one you have with yourself, where you come to terms with the fact that this conversation that you have out loud with them might be the one that ends the relationship. And so we're afraid to have a conversation with them because we haven't had a conversation with ourselves first about what we're prepared to make peace with, about what is most important to us. In our love lives, and this is a model you can use for any part of your life, but in our love lives, in order to change, in order to get a different result, we have to rewire our brain. I put an entire chapter in this new book called How to Rewire Your Brain. Now, how do you do that? When you've been doing things for a certain way for so long, how do you get to the point where you're actually prepared to do something different? The first thing you have to do is you have to make change absolutely necessary for yourself. Now, one of the things I do is get people to have the conversations with themselves that they've been putting off year after year after year. That conversation might be with a 35-year-old or a 37-year-old who finally has the conversation with themselves about how important it is to them to have children. Because it all starts with getting really, really, really honest about that.
How do you make somebody who's in their 30s or even late 20s who is starting to panic about this? Mm-hmm. How do you coach somebody to have that conversation with themselves? Because we will come in and rationalize, oh, they might change. Oh, I have time. Oh, I could just do this. Oh, I could just do that. And there is a biological reality if you are somebody whose one of your biggest life goals is to have a family of your own. And, you know, after coaching people for 17 years, you've seen this window close on people.
I've seen it close. I've seen the protracted grief that takes place for many years afterwards that many of them still haven't been able to process. I mean, I've watched the pain. I've had a front row seat to the most terrible pain that people go through. I had a woman at my retreat who just balled up on the floor and was inconsolable because she had spent 10 years married to a man who always said that he wasn't sure about having children. And year after year after year, she delayed the conversation, not only with him, but with herself, and missed her window biologically. And then he ended up leaving the relationship anyway. And the grief that she felt was profound. The conversation starts by truly assessing, how important is this to me? What is it about this that makes it something that I feel is a non-negotiable for me? At least a non-negotiable that I'm going to try for. Because even for those for whom it's a non-negotiable, we all know not everyone has it as simple as they think it's going to. And a lot of people find it's impossible.
Well, and I also want to broaden this out because what you're actually talking about is the level of honesty you have to have with yourself to go from level 2 to level 3 if it's not happening. Whether that's dating to moving in, or it is living together to engaged, or engaged to married, or whatever, or trying harder in a relationship, that there is this movement that has to be intentional to get you to the commitment phase. And I can see how if you don't even know what the hell you want and you're not being honest with yourself, you wouldn't be able to have the conversation in a casual sex situation of saying, hey, I just know myself and I don't want to put my energy into something that isn't actually heading somewhere. And so I just need to check in with you because having a lot of fun, but I know myself and I prioritize my well-being and my time. And I just need to do the gut check now.
Even to have the conversation lightly and playfully, you need to have a very strong sense of what matters to you, of the path that you're on in life. You have to. Otherwise, you'll never back it up. Anything you do will be a tactic. It won't be a standard.
I think the mistake that a lot of us make is that we look at a person across from us and we think, even if this isn't up to my standards, I can fix this person, I can twist this person, we're not thinking this consciously, but if I can get close enough, I can change this. And that is a tactic that will backfire on you.
Yes.
You've seen it happen over and over again.
The idea that if I get close enough and try hard enough that they're going to change is a non sequitur.
What does that mean? That's a big word.
It's a really dangerous assumption to make. I call it the one-day wager. I stake my life, my energy, my time, my most precious resources in the world, the ones I can't get back, on the idea that this person is one day going to suddenly change into all of the things I need them to become for me to be happy. The irony is people can change, but they change through hard conversations. And you also find out they can't change through hard conversations because you'll learn, even if they say they're going to do something, you'll learn whether there's progress or not. And if there's no progress, there's your answer. There's a great Jacob M. Broad quote that goes, consider how hard it is to change yourself, and you'll understand how foolish it is to think you can change someone else.
Ooh, I wish I said that, because that's a good one.
It's just think,
It's so true.
I want to eat well right now, Mel.
Okay.
I'm not eating well.
Why not?
Because we're on the road and there's so much good food in every city. And we have been doing a lot of broadcasting and I haven't been getting to the gym, and I'm not making excuses, but I kind of am as well. And it's just really, really, really been hard. And when I don't train, I eat badly. And when I eat badly, I then don't feel good. But then I'm in a cycle. And that's kind of the cycle I'm in and have been in for the last week. My relationship with food has been a really challenging one. I've been food's been an addiction for me since as long as I can remember. And it has been an extraordinarily difficult thing to fix. Very, 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 very difficult. And I'm still working on it. It's an ongoing thing. And I want to change that. I'm motivated to change that. So and anyone who goes to therapy knows this. If you decided to go to therapy, that's an amazing step. Now all of the work is ahead of you.
Right.
Because you're going to see things you might want to change, and it's going to be really, really difficult to move the needle on those things. If it was easy, you would have done it already. So now take someone who's may not even accept that there's something that needs to be changed. Even if they think there's something that they could change to make the relationship better, they now have to be motivated to do it. And now they have to have the stomach and the resilience and the continued sustained effort to actually go ahead and make that change. That is an extraordinary assumption to make of someone that we are with. Now, can someone change? Yes. Have you had the conversation with them? Is there progress? Is the progress continuing? You're probably not even close to that level of understanding, because right now you're having the conversation about what's bothering you with your friends and not even with the person.
It's true. I'm in level 2. I won't even have that conversation about level 3. So I'm definitely not going to talk about them. Wait, I want to make sure that I get to level 4.
Yep.
Because when you have the hard conversation, and is there a mistake that people make when it comes to level 3, meaning the commitment piece?
Thinking love is all you need. Love is not all you need.
What do you need?
You need level 4.
What's level 4?
Compatibility.
What is compatibility in your work?
Do we work together?
How do you know? Because a lot of people don't know. Like they want it to work together. Mm-hmm. But how do you know if it works together?
Well, I think the baseline is, can we get our fundamental needs met in this relationship? There are, I think, lots of luxury items in a relationship, but at the core, can I get my fundamental needs met? You have to ask yourself what those things are. What are the things I truly need? Like a friend of mine always dated dancers. And I said to him, you're married now. I said, you always dated dancers. Does your wife dance? He said, least coordinated person I've ever met. And I was like, so does it bother you? Because that was always your preference. And he said, Matt, how much of my life do you think I spend dancing? So I maybe dance once or twice a year. He said, it's literally has no bearing on the quality of my marriage. This person is an amazing partner, an amazing mother. We have the best time together. She's my best friend. Like, those are the things that affect my life every day.
I'm so glad that we're talking about compatibility, because I believe that this is one of those topics that you don't understand compatibility until you meet somebody that you're actually compatible with. And you go, oh, wait a minute. This is so much easier. And when I reflect back on prior relationships where I realize now I just wasn't compatible. There may have been a commitment there. We were in level 3, but the level 4 piece, there was no compatibility, even though we wanted to be compatible. And here's how I know. There was always so much friction. Like, everything felt like an effort. There was underlying agitation, whether we're trying to pick a restaurant or making plans on what to do on a Saturday, or like those relationships that you find yourself in where everything that the person does irritates you. That's a sign that you're not compatible. When you're compatible with somebody, it's not that hard. Sure, you fight. Sure, there are things that bother you, but it passes so quickly because there's this energetic match. I'm the kind of person that has massive ADHD, and I'm very competitive and hard driving. And the reason why I'm so compatible with my husband is probably because he is a very easygoing, very kind of person. And if I were with somebody that were more hard driving like me, we'd probably kill each other because there'd be a ton of friction around the energy with us. And so compatibility for me, Matt, really is when it just works. And it's easier to tell when you're not compatible because it's hard. And you're always kind of upset with somebody or walking on eggshells, or you don't think like you can be yourself. And I guess the bottom line is that I knew when I met Chris, he was the one, because I realized, oh my God, I can be exactly who I am and exactly who I'm not. I don't have to pretend. I don't have to work hard to be somebody different to make this work. That is what is at the heart of compatibility, that you can be you. And when you find that, you'll know it, because it'll be easier than any other relationship you've had in the past because the energy matches. What is the foundation of a healthy and a long-lasting partnership? Well, there are 4 kind of categories that I think about when I think about a healthy and a long-lasting partnership. And it's awareness, it's how you deal with conflict, it is the values that you have and that your partner has, and it's also the connection that you and your partner not only have, but how you are both showing up to strengthen it. And so awareness is both awareness of yourself and awareness of what your partner needs in a relationship. And in order to have self-awareness and awareness of what your partner needs, you got to have a level of understanding about yourself, and you also have to have an interest in learning and being influenced by your partner and what their needs are. And what you'll notice is, of the 9 things that I'm going to flag for you, like if you see this shit, it is going to attack one of these pillars of a healthy relationship. The second category was conflict. Now, it may surprise you that I'm labeling conflict as one of the categories of what makes a relationship healthy. But when you look at research about couples who stay married and couples who get divorced, it's the couples who know how to fight with respect and how to resolve problems together and end gridlock. Those are the couples that stay together in healthy relationships. Those folks that don't talk, that hold grudges, that give each other the silent treatment, this is all behavior we're going to be flagging in the 9 signs that your partner is disrespecting you and you got problems in your relationship. That creates massive conflict because you're actually not working anything out. You're in gridlock and standoff with one another. So awareness, the ability to resolve conflict. Another one is shared values. I mean, you hear obviously about trust and honesty in a relationship is super important, but so is the fact that you and your partner have a vision of how it is that together you can create a more meaningful life. Super important. If you're missing that, forget about it. And finally, connection. And I can sum up connection this way. Do you and your partner engage in behavior where you're turning toward one another, where you have an admiration for each other? If you don't, you are not going to have a relationship that gets stronger over time. If you have the kind of relationship where you're constantly turning away from each other or griping about each other, that is not the foundation for a beautiful and a long-lasting relationship. And so I know you're nodding along because what I'm saying makes a lot of sense, right? Of course you got to have self-awareness and awareness of your partner. Of course you need to problem solve and resolve conflict in respectful ways. Of course you should be with somebody that shares your values. And of course I want to be with somebody who turns toward me and helps strengthen the connection. No kidding, Mel. Well, easier said than done. And the reason why it's easier said than done is because there are 9 types of behavior that we kind of dismiss as, okay, not that big of a deal. I can live with it, whatever. And the truth is, now that you understand what really builds a healthy relationship and strengthens it over time, you'll see why these behaviors that I'm about to explain are non-negotiables. Like if you spot this in a relationship that you're in, you got to flag it, you got to call it out, and you cannot tolerate it. Because if you allow this behavior to continue, it will destroy your relationship. Why, Dr. Franco, do attachment styles matter?
Yes. So our attachment style really impacts how we give and receive love, and thus our ability to build healthy relationships with other people.
Wow. Does everybody have an attachment style?
Yeah, we all have an attachment style. It's basically like we all come into new relationships with a set of assumptions, and those assumptions define our attachment style.
Okay. So can you give me, we know that the 4 attachment styles we've already talked about: secure, avoidant, anxious, and disorganized.
Disorganized, yeah.
Can you give me 4 signs of each attachment style?
Sure. Yeah. So let's think about this practically in our relationships. If you're with someone securely attached, you set a boundary with them, they accept the boundary. They don't try to push it, change it. They don't suddenly pull away because you set that boundary. If you're with someone securely attached, they're comfortable being vulnerable. You'll see that they're being vulnerable with you, but almost in a more reciprocal way. Like they'll be vulnerable, they'll wait for you to be vulnerable back, then they'll be more vulnerable. Whereas someone avoidantly attached really won't be able to be vulnerable. If someone is securely attached, they can address you directly, but not confrontationally. So let's say this is in a friendship context, right? Where, it feels like the friendship has been one-sided. The securely attached friend will say, I love you, I want to be close to you. And I've noticed I've been the one reaching out and that's been hurting me. And I want our friendship to continue. So I figured I'd bring this up. So those are some signs of securely attached people. Anxiously attached people, their core fear is that everyone will abandon them. So you can tell what someone's anxiously attached when they're almost like willing to give up their sense of self to be in relationship with other people. So they're like hyper accommodating often until it really blows up, and then they become the opposite. When it comes, they anxiously attached people because they fear abandonment. They're not necessarily good at setting boundaries. So they might agree to things and then it seems like they're resentful about it. We talked about, egoistic giving, that they're generous oftentimes to get people to like them. They're attracted to relationships with people that don't seem to like them very much because they've learned that they had to earn love. So you'll see an anxiously attached person having these friendships with people or these relationships with people that kind of mistreat them because that makes them motivated to earn love. And that's what they learned about love, that it's something that's earned, not freely given. And then avoidantly attached people, you'll know they're avoidant because they're never vulnerable. You don't feel like you really know them. When you maybe do have a moment of intimacy and closeness, they suddenly pull away and you're like, what the heck is going on? They have a lot of shame but they don't really admit to it. So they really struggle with things like apologizing, whereas anxiously attached person is going to over apologize. The avoidantly attached person is going to say, no, this is not my fault. This is kind of your fault. They just don't tend to put much effort into their relationship. So if you feel like, man, this person, I'm trying to connect with them, they're not really meeting me there, and that person might be more avoidantly attached. Like I can't get them to like try. They're not really trying. That might be a sign of avoidant attachment. That being said, of course, attachment is not stagnant. In different relationships, we can have different attachment styles based off of the attachment style of the other person. So, it's hard to say based on your interactions with one person what their attachment style is.
What about somebody who's disorganized? What are some of the signs that you're kind of in a relationship or a friendship with somebody who has a disorganized attachment style?
Yeah, so the disorganized attachment style it's not organized, right? So it feels like chaos. Sometimes they want you to get really close. Sometimes they're pushing you away. Sudden withdrawal. They're they have trouble regulating their emotions because their relationships have not helped them do that in the past. People have not validated their feelings. So you might get more escalation, more anger. They might be interpreting your actions with a lot of negative intent, like you're going out of your way to harm me, to kind of destroy me. And so it'll kind of feel chaotic. Like you kind of will be like, what is going on? Like I thought we were just connecting, and they have a kind of very different interpretation of the situation. And usually with a disorganized attachment style, there's a history of a pretty brutal background, like a history of some sort of abuse in childhood.
Is it easier to spot someone's attachment style in yourself or in somebody else?
One way that I hear other people's attachment style is like how they perceive other people. So, the insecure with anxious people, you hear them say like, all my relationships are fragile, or everybody's going to kind of abandon me. And the avoidance, you'll hear them say, nobody can be trusted. Right. And when you have this one template about everybody, it's a sign that it's not actually everybody, because you're not actually discerning each person. You just are coming in with this understanding and superimposing it onto the present, which is what attachment style is really. So when I hear someone secure, though, they always try to give people the benefit of the doubt while having boundaries. So they'll say things like, I had to love that person from afar. And they can admit that even when even though we didn't, maybe like when they talk about their exes, there'll be some complexity. Like it didn't work out for this reason, but I like them for this reason, instead of like my ex was, just evil. So you'll hear that complexity with securely attached people, and you'll hear them trying to be as loving as possible to people while also having them recognize what they need for themselves. So kind of both things. There's just more nuance with securely attached people. And I'm sorry, I'm answering your previous question, but I'm realizing, so I have so many more thoughts on this. Whereas avoidantly attached people actually have memory issues because they block out their emotion. If you ask them to talk about things, they are not very expressive. Like it's hard to get them to describe things. It's hard to get them to describe what they think or what they feel, because our emotions are big indicators of what we think and feel, and our opinions in our internal world. So it'll almost feel like, with someone avoidantly attached, it's like, yeah, the conversation is maybe it's specifically when you talk about relationships, the conversation doesn't go as deep. Whereas anxiously attached people, their memory, they tend to misremember things and remember things as more negative than they actually were. So that's really interesting quirk, attachment theory and memory. But, back to your major question, which was, is it easier to recognize in yourself and someone else? Honestly, I think anxiously attached people tend to be so hungry for information as to how to improve. So when I talk, anxiously attached people are ready, they follow up with me and they're like, that's me. Like, I'm anxiously attached. I cling. I'm so afraid everyone's going to abandon me. I think everybody's judging me. So I think often anxiously attached people, they hear, the basics of attachment theory, and they kind of, quickly see themselves in it. That's not happened to me as much with avoidantly attached people. Again, they struggle with vulnerability. So I imagine it would be harder to say I'm avoidantly attached and I've had these struggles in the past.
So I have a question about that, because that's fascinating.
Sure.
If you are avoidantly attached and you're listening to somebody talk about attachment theory, given that somebody that has an anxious attachment style might immediately self-diagnose, might immediately see themselves, what is an avoidant attachment style person likely to experience as they're learning about attachment styles and considering themselves as they're listening to you, Dr. Franco?
Yeah, discomfort. When you get deep with avoidantly attached people, or you try to get them to acknowledge some of their wounds, they feel very uncomfortable with that, and will kind of, maybe they'll stop listening. Honestly, I mean, this obviously depends, and honestly, there's some research that finds that if you're in a relationship with someone who's avoidant but has humility, there's a lot better outcomes. Whereas if the avoidant person is like, everything's your fault and I'm fine and you're being sensitive and right, then it's going to be really hard to connect with that specific form of avoidant attachment. But so there has to be, with an avoidant attachment, a willingness to look at yourself and to be conscious of your patterns, which I think anxiously attached people tend to be more willing to do. If you're having conflict with an avoidant person, often they are just stonewalling, or they're ghosting, or they're minimizing, or they're saying, like, we're not going to talk about this. Like, basically anything related to relationships and intimacy really scares and overwhelms avoidantly attached people. Like, sometimes we think of anxiously attached people as more sensitive, in that they get really overwhelmed when a relationship's not going well. But so do avoidantly attached people. They just express it. They express that sensitivity through removal. Like they can't, they're so overwhelmed emotionally by relationships, by intimacy. And so they're stonewalling, which is a sign of being emotionally overwhelmed. They're being closed off, they're being dismissive, because it's too emotionally overwhelming to look at some of their own patterns, because fundamentally avoidantly attached people have a lot of shame. If you tell them they've made a mistake, they have this core belief that I am a failure, that I am deficient. They probably won't admit that to you. Right. But anytime you try to offer a critique to an avoidantly attached person, that you might trigger that core wound of, I'm a failure, I'm deficient, which is why it can feel so hard for an avoidantly attached person to hear some of their patterns and hear some of their dynamics.
Hey Mel, it's Jennifer. Can you do a podcast not on marriage advice, but something about how marriage is so wacky hard and unusual and worth staying the course? I went back and listened to your opening podcast and was so blown away by the exposure of what you'd gone through, but also of the impact upon your marriage. And so I'm kind of blown away that your marriage existed through all of that. I feel a lot of cultural pressure and voices about leaving marriage, but not so much about staying. Like, maybe the pendulum has shifted generationally from, quote, stay for the kids, to, quote, leave to make yourself happy. But isn't there another way, another kind of perspective on the why of staying? Do you think you could talk about that? I love the show, your vibe, your honesty. It really helps. Thank you so much, Mel.
Thank you for this question. I love your vibe, and I love the question itself. And I also want to thank you for distinguishing between the request of asking for advice about marriage and relationships versus just talking about my experience of how hard and wacky having a long-term relationship can be. And the truth is, I don't talk about this topic of relationships and marriage and giving advice about it all that much, because the fact is, I don't think I do know the secret to marriage. I've been married for 26 years, but I feel like my husband, Chris, and we are still figuring out the secret to marriage. And I also worry, if I'm being perfectly honest, and I promise this would be a brutally honest episode, that if Chris and I started giving relationship and marriage advice, and we somehow held ourselves out there as the model for a marriage that works, it would blow up our own marriage. I mean, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but it seems like every other day there is some author or influencer that has been giving relationship advice who then announces that they're getting divorced. And I personally do not want to get divorced. But I can't stop thinking about your question. And you're not the only one who has been asking me to talk about the secret or the strategies or just some of the things that Chris and I have learned along the way after being together for 28 years and being married for 26 years. So, Jennifer, after much trepidation, I decided, fuck it, I'm going to answer this. And the first thing I want to talk about is your observation about whether or not that pendulum has shifted generationally when it comes to advice about marriage, and in particular, when marriage gets hard. And I agree with you. I think for somebody our age, and for those of you that may be new to listening to this podcast, I am 54 years old. My husband is 53 years old. We have 3 children who are going to be 24, 22, and our son is about to be 18 years old. And Chris and I have been through a lot of ups and downs. And growing up, the relationship was always, you got to stay together for the kids. And I personally think that is the world's worst advice. And a lot of the research bears out the fact that your kids know when you're miserable. And if you're staying only to tough it out for the kids, your kids are now seeing a model of a relationship that is profoundly dysfunctional. And the way that they learn about relationships is by observing you. And so I don't think you should stay for your kids. And I think that is lousy advice. And a lot of us have heard that advice for a long time. What I believe is that if you do decide that you're going to stay in a relationship, you have to do that for yourself. And when you consider the reasons why you want to stay in a relationship, if you put yourself first, it may be that it matters to you based on your values to keep your family intact. And one of the things that I think a lot of people don't think about when times get really tough is that your marriage is actually more than just you and your partner. Your marriage is your family. It's your network of friends that you've built together. It's the history that you've created together. And so if you see value in what you've created to date, that's a really valid and important reason to work on your marriage, and relationship and try to work through the challenges that have come up. But that right there is very different than staying for the kids out of guilt and shame. So stay because you want to stay. Work on it because you want to work on it based on your values and based on what you feel in your heart. And I also agree with you, Jennifer, that there has been a big swing. I mean, you see it all over social media. Leave to make yourself happy. If you're unhappy in that marriage, you just walk right out that door. And I would extend this conversation that you and I are going to have today beyond marriage. Because I think that the same things that make a marriage healthy and happy and go the distance are the exact same thing that makes a friendship happy and healthy and go the distance. And we live in this world, and I worry a lot about this, where people are really quick to just X people out, to ghost somebody. That, I'll tell you something about being in the content space. Anytime you put up something on social media and you talk about narcissism or toxic behavior in other people, the post goes crazy. People love to just talk about other people being toxic. And I worry about the fact that we have gotten to a point where the pendulum has swung and people are starting to feel like when things get tough, I just leave. When somebody's a jerk, I just walk out. If they're the problem, then nah. And the fact is, the exit door is usually not where you find the best answers. That's typically the easy out. I have found over and over and over again that the answers to a better relationship are usually in the mirror. And so what I want to say about that is this. If you're in a relationship with somebody who's abusive, leave. If you're in a relationship with somebody who's narcissistic, leave. If you're in a relationship that makes you absolutely miserable and you have tried to work through everything, you should leave, and that will make you happy. But if you're leaving because you don't want to do the work, that's a problem. And that habit of bailing when things get tough, you're just going to take that right into the next relationship. And that's why I am saying it's not necessarily the answer that's going to make you happy. So the reason why I think that it is important in a friendship or in a marriage or a relationship to stop yourself from walking out the door and just pause long enough to do the work to stay is, number one, I don't know a single person who has truly put in the work to repair a marriage or a friendship who regretted it. But I do know a ton of people who just got frustrated and got divorced, and they now regret that they didn't try harder, or that they now miss friends that they ghosted or stopped talking to years ago over something stupid because they were too afraid to have the hard conversation. And so I do, based on the 28 years that I have been in a relationship with my husband, I have seen this over and over and over again. So if you are willing to put yourself in pause and attempt to repair the marriage or the friendship, you're not going to regret that effort. Second, and I've already alluded to this, a marriage isn't just a relationship that you have with your partner. It's the community, it's the friendships and the networks that you've built, it's the history that you have together. And so when you end a marriage or a friendship, the truth is, you basically blow apart all of those things. And so that's another reason why it's worth trying to work on it. If you still see something for yourself inside this relationship or friendship, and I think a lot about the fact that, when people get divorced, I would love to think that everybody can have a modern divorce and you can blend families and ex-spouses can be partners and everybody can be with their new partners and blended families and have holidays together. And that's how it should be if you're going to end a marriage. But that's not the norm. And so I just want to be honest, because I don't think we think through these things, that you won't have the same relationship with the sister-in-law that you love. You will not be going to your old in-laws, if you adore them, for the holidays anymore. Friends are going to feel funky because they're going to feel like they got to go with the one or the other in terms of your relationship. And that just is how it is right now. I wish it were different, but I promised you I'd tell you the truth. And now I want to just deliver even tougher love about whether or not you decide to end this marriage. Because the fact is, let's just say that you end this thing, right? What are you going to do? Oh, I know exactly what you're going to do, because you've also seen this a million times. Once you get out of this marriage, you're going to be highly motivated to get in the best shape of your life, to get back out there, to get healthier, to be more private, to be more vibrant. Why? Well, so that you can attract somebody better. What if you were to just do that now? I mean, why not do that now for yourself? And, again, I want to say, don't stay with somebody who's abusive. But if you're sitting there bitching to your girlfriends or your guy friends or just your friends in general and your family that you've become roommates and that your spouse is no more fun and you don't know who you're married to anymore, but underneath all that, you just wish it were better, you still love this person, don't just throw in the towel because you're frustrated. Do the work. That's what I've learned. And you talked about the fact that in some of the beginning episodes, I shared a little bit about our story. And, a lot of you already know it, so I'm not going to go into great detail. But, for those of you who are new who are listening to the podcast, back in 2008, I had lost my job. We were $800,000 in debt because my husband's restaurant was going under. His restaurant business was really struggling. He hadn't been paid in months. We were just liens on the house, drinking ourselves into the ground. And I got to a point where it was easier to be angry at Chris and to just be resentful of him and to be like, I don't like you. I don't want to be with you. Like, you fucked this up, like as if it wasn't partially my fault too. And I want to say something to you if you're sitting there thinking that the grass is greener. And look, maybe the grass is, but I want you to stop and consider something. If I ever get pissed off at my husband and I'm like, you know what? Chris is annoying. I just can't stand this about him or that about him, or he's always like thinking about something. He doesn't talk and he's not that fun and he doesn't make me laugh or whatever you may bitch about. I stop and say to myself, what's the average 50-year-old guy like? I mean, anybody my age Sorry, dudes, but any one of you that gets to the age of 50, you got shit in the closet. You got stuff that you have lied about. You've got things that you're ashamed of. You've got things that you haven't worked through. And so here I've got two options. I can either turn toward the person that I was once in love with and do the work to make it better, to grow together. And I could or I could roll the dice. And I could end something because I'm frustrated or pissed off or things got challenging or whatever the situation may be. And I could literally go try to create a relationship with somebody else who, by the way, I have not seen what this person has been doing for the last 28 years. So I don't know what the hell they're telling me, whether it's the truth or not. I don't know what trauma they have buried beneath their skin. I don't know what kind of bullshit they did in their prior marriage. But if you're willing to turn toward the person that you're with now, you know at least part of the story. And for me, it has always seemed worth it. No matter how hard things got with Chris, no matter how scary things got, no matter how much we resented and hated one another, no matter how much we were drinking, I never got to the point where I thought, it's way better to roll the dice and try to meet someone new than to try to work it through with this person right here. And, the truth is, and I'm sure this is true about you, I've talked about juicy peaches and embracing your juicy peachiness on this podcast, but there are days I am not a peach at all. And so when a marriage goes off the rails, when you get to the point where you're roommates, it's not just your partner's fault. And that gets to this concern that I have, that we are so quick to just cut people out of our lives, to call people toxic, to end something because we're sick of it. And we haven't even done the work to try to fix it. We haven't had the harder conversation. And so, that's it. I feel like it is always worth working on it. And so if you're struggling in your relationship or you're struggling in a friendship, absolutely hit the pause button. Do not spend another second bitching to your girlfriends or your guy friends about the situation, and put your time and energy into working to make it better, because I guarantee you, you have not communicated what you're feeling clearly. You have not made requests about what you want. You have not started unpacking where things went off the rails. And the truth is, if you're willing to work on it, you can make it better. I don't care how long or how little you've been married. If you're willing to work on it, you can make it better. And I think that is the secret to a long-lasting marriage, relationship, friendship. It lasts because you're willing to work on it. And that brings me to the most important caveat of all of this. And I think this is the biggest single truth about relationships. Relationships only work if both of you are willing to work on it together. This is not a one-way street. There is no halfway on this. There is no, I'm going to fix myself and that fixes my marriage. You will never change your marriage on your end on your own. Period. Full stop. And so if you're listening to this and you have somebody that won't work on it with you, I need you to listen to the takeaways that I'm about to give you, the lessons that I've learned actually very recently after being married to the same person for over 26 years. These are lessons that I have learned very recently after Chris and I have been in marriage therapy for 2 years. And, even saying marriage therapy is kind of weird, because I think about going to therapy like going to the gym, that it's a way to make something better. In fact, at this point, I have benefited so much and learned so much about my husband that I didn't even know, having been married to him for the first 24 years. It's so incredible to have a third person who is not sleeping with you guys or living with you guys to weigh in on what they observe. It has been one of the greatest things that we have ever done for our relationship. I'm kicking myself for not having done it sooner. And so, and so what I want to do is I want to share with you, because I'm just getting so many questions. How did you guys go the distance? How did you make it through the challenging times? How did you do it? The way we did it is that we were both willing to do the work. And no matter how far apart Chris and I felt or were, or how much we were struggling in our lives or our careers or financially or with addiction or whatever it may have been, the one thing that I can say is that we were always willing to work on it. And no matter how pissed off we got with one another or frustrated or isolated from one another, I knew deep down that he did love me and that I loved him. And, having faced bankruptcy and having been unemployed and having struggled to pay for groceries with 3 kids under the age of 10, I know that when life gets hard, it is so much easier to be frustrated and angry because you're triggered than it is to be afraid. And, back when the restaurant business was really struggling, I was so pissed at Chris. Like, I was just resentful. I was resentful that he wasn't successful. And he knew it. He could feel it. And that only contributed to the shame that he felt. The fact is, there are going to be years in your relationships when it goes the distance that are amazing and years that completely blow. Years where you feel very connected and years where you feel like you're in your own corners. And the past couple years, and kind of going through the craziness that happened during the pandemic, it's been really painful. And it did some real damage to our relationship. And so this is why, Jennifer, I'm so happy that you did not ask for marriage advice. Because again, I'm going to say everything I'm about to share with you, these are not the secrets to the perfect marriage. I am not the expert in what your marriage should look like. I like to keep my marriage between Chris and I. In fact, there are things that Chris and I talk about with our therapists that our kids don't know. You want to know why? Because it's not their fucking business. And they shouldn't know. And your kids are not your therapist, and they're not involved in your marriage, and you shouldn't be talking to them about the stuff that you're mad about related to your partner. It's terrible to do that. Work on it with your partner. Because the more time you spend complaining and griping about your partner to your friends or your family, or dear God, do not do it with your kids, you need to be spending twice that amount of time talking to your spouse. See, that's why you're not connected. That's why you have problems, because you're not actually talking to your spouse. So when we first started seeing a therapist, it was in 2020. And we decided to go to therapy because we had some major things going on, because obviously the pandemic turned our life upside down and we were both at our wits' end and we were fighting a lot. And here's one of the first things that our therapist said to us, and it really has stuck with me. And I think that this framework will really work for you. This framework will be really helpful for you too. He observed that Chris and I are excellent at the transactional aspects of life. We can cook dinner together. We can sync up our calendars. We can run errands. We can do projects around the house. We're really great at parenting together. We get the day-to-day stuff done. We love spending time as a family. We have meaningful work that we feel connected to. But here's what happened. Somewhere during the past probably 5 to 8 years, we got so swept up in the doing that we stopped being connected. And the fact is, I was very resentful that he wasn't successful in his career. At least in the beginning, I was really resentful. And I can see that my resentment made me turn on him. And it made me turn on him when he needed me most. Like, I stopped believing that he would be able to save that business. And so I can see, and I will admit, and this is kind of one of those episodes where I'm the asshole. And yeah, I'm just going to admit all the things that I did wrong in the hopes that you don't repeat the mistakes that I made. I can see that I was engaged in what I've seen people call the quiet quitting. And for me, it was the quiet quitting of a marriage. You might not even be conscious to this. You might be doing this in your job. You might be doing this in your family. When people use the term we've become roommates, I think that what you're talking about is that you're in a relationship where one of you is quietly quitting. You're doing the bare minimum. Your resentment and griping is building. Maybe you saw your parents doing it, enduring something. And for Chris and I, in all of the doing, we lost that deep emotional connection to one another that we had worked so hard to build over the years. And resentment for me had started to really come in, and he could feel it. And the emotional connection that you have, that's the glue for your relationship. When it becomes really transactional, there will be resentment. And there was resentment on Chris's side too. And that emotional connection is what was missing for Chris and I. The love was there underneath it all. But there was this like mid layer that had built up that made us really lose a connection to one another. And I remember this particular moment. It was right before we went to therapy. A really close friend of ours saw us at a dinner that friends of ours had just invited a bunch of us over for a barbecue. And she called me the next day and she said, "Is Chris okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I think Chris is fine. Why?" And she said, "Something's wrong with him, Mel." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "There's just something missing. Like the light behind his eyes is gone. There's normally this like magnetic connection between the two of you. And I haven't seen the two of you in a couple years, but it's just something's wrong." And she was right. What was wrong was, number one, we were missing the connection. We were disconnected. And there were a lot of other things wrong too. One of which I would come to learn is that Chris was really struggling with depression. And so that brings me to, well, what do you do? How do you get the connection back? Mel, if I'm going to hit the pause button, and before I just shove the middle finger in the air and say, "You're the problem, I'm out of here, I'm going to be happy, I'm leaving, I'm done," what do I want you to stop and think about before you do that? Well, there are 6 things that you got to do, in my personal opinion, that you can do and that do work if both of you are willing to work on it. The only way that you're going to change how you are showing up in relationships to yourself and everybody else is to take care of it in the subconscious.
100%.
How do we do that?
Okay, so the first thing is we want to go back to the principles of repetition and emotion. That repetition emotion of us being able to first meet our needs, like we talked about, is a really important pillar of healing. The second thing is we can talk about a really simple tool to reprogram the core wounds, which is called autosuggestion. So basically how autosuggestion works is the first thing, and I'll give a sort of a background story here first or context for it, but the first thing is we want to put ourselves in what we call a suggestible state. As somebody with a background in hypnosis, this is where this comes from. Suggestible state basically means that your brain is producing mostly alpha brainwaves. And when you're in alpha brainwave state, you're a lot more suggestible, aka your subconscious mind is much more open to suggestion or to being reprogrammed. If you've ever seen somebody in an alpha state, it's often after a deep meditation. It's the first hour that they wake up in the morning, the last hour before they go to sleep. Or if you've ever seen somebody when they're watching television and you're like, Bob, and like Bob's just like in the television. He's like in this sort of trance-like state. When we watch television, we actually produce a lot of alpha brainwaves. So we get into a relaxed state. Easiest way is first thing in the morning when you wake up.
Okay, but can I just make sure I understand?
Yes.
That when you first wake up, you are in the alpha state.
Yes.
But if you look at your phone, I'm assuming you will not
you
be
can
in your alpha
take yourself
state.
out of it very quickly.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're talking roll out of bed.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
Immediately, the first thing you do so that you can take advantage of this alpha state in your brain, where you're highly suggestible, which means highly programmable, everybody. What are we doing?
So then what we do is we take our first core wound. Okay. So the let's just use a really simple one for argument's sake. So let's say it's I'm not good enough.
Okay. Now, how the hell do we figure out our core wound?
So remember the anxious prerequisite was like abandoned, alone, excluded, disliked, not good enough. So we mentioned them all before. So hopefully people recognize themselves in that attachment style so far.
So if you go, so the process is first locate yourself in the attachment style.
Yes.
Second, really dig into what does the wound and what is the wound for you and how is it showing up?
Yes. And I mean, you can if you're not sure, you can ask yourself, when I get triggered, what am I afraid the worst case scenario will be? Like you can think of times you were triggered and be like, what am I really afraid will happen next? And that's a way of kind of isolating it. But as a general rule, vast majority of people are like, I have the abandonment core wound and they feel it and they know. And so you can pick the one that's really bothering you the most. If we started with one for each, it would be abandonment for anxious attachment style. It would be betrayed for fearful avoidant, but also very strong secondary abandoned or trapped. Those also show up quite strongly. And dismissive avoidant would be I am defective. So like I am shameful, essentially.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so we pick the core wound that's bothering us the most. Then we oppose it. Okay. So what's the opposite of the core wound? Let's just use I'm not good enough. I am good enough. Now here's the really interesting part.
But what if you don't believe it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, here's the thing. Like, okay, well, if my core wound that's been in my subconscious for 50 years that runs on repeat, where I literally look in the mirror and go, that's a loser.
That's the point, right? Is that your subconscious doesn't believe it. And so we have to address, like a lot of people will do affirmations. Affirmations are extremely limiting. I'm a big not believer in affirmations. Here's why. Your conscious mind speaks language. Your subconscious does not speak in language. If I say, do not, whatever you do, think of the pink elephant, you can't help it. Like you think of the pink elephant. Your conscious mind hears do not. Your subconscious mind do not is irrelevant. It just hears and sees pink elephant, right? So what we have to do is we have to understand the language our subconscious mind speaks, which is emotion and imagery.
Huh. Okay.
So we need to leverage emotion and imagery for reprogramming, and we need to do it repetitively because the repetition is what fires and wires. So if you think of subconscious reprogramming, 3 simple ingredients: repetition, emotion, imagery. The more you have of all of it, the better and the faster it will work.
Okay.
So if we have I am not good enough, we have to find emotion and imagery for I am good enough. So if you were to look for memories, if I were to say, okay, tell me your favorite childhood experience and close your eyes for it, you would close your eyes and you would start talking about it and you would smile and you would actually see the memory in your mind's eye. And the emotion is actually the container, or the memory is the container for emotion there. So you would actually feel the emotion still in that memory and you would see the images. So what we do for auto-suggestion, we get in that suggestible state, we get in that relaxed space. Then we say, okay, what's the opposite of my wound? I am not good enough. I am good enough. And then we find 10 pieces of evidence or memory for why we are good enough. So for example, it could be I graduated from this school and we want to feel about it and see ourselves walking across the podium or, getting our certificate. And as we do that, our diploma, and as we do that, we are actually using our conscious mind to speak to our subconscious mind. And we are doing it repetitively. So we are firing and wiring new paradigms of how this works. And then we ideally want to divest, not feed into those old stories, those old narratives in the same way. But if we literally just do that, 10 pieces of evidence in a suggestible state to oppose our core wound for 21 days, there are tremendous, tremendous results people will have. And they can actually drop these big core wounds that they've been carrying forever that are causing them in the first place to feel all that panic around abandonment or fearing to really rely on people or open up or fearing being trapped. Like we can let those things go once and for all.
So given that you've done this with more than 31,000 people, what is the coaching that you have for somebody who is new to this and they're sitting there saying to themselves, well, I don't even know what an image would be of me being loved. I'm sure this is the most common objection you hear, which is I can't think of one.
Yes.
So what advice or coaching do you have for the person listening that's like, okay, I get it. I'm going to bathe in this emotion and these visual images, but I can't even come up with one for I'm good enough or I'm lovable. How do you do this?
Great question. And this is for sure, like you said, one of the biggest sort of points that people hit where they will feel stuck. So what we do is we start general and then get specific. So if somebody's not open to seeing that I am loved or I'm worthy of love, we start with things like it is possible to be worthy of love. And then we can even start as general as looking for other people who are similar to us or other people we know and how we may share characteristics. So we're just trying to, the really interesting part is that repetition and emotion will build momentum. So if we start with something that just feels like a little stretch outside of that subconscious comfort zone, because part of why we are also like, I have no idea is because we have a comfort zone that's like, no, I am unloved. And I'm scared to even believe that I could be loved because every time I've hoped for that, it doesn't work. So our subconscious will try to like give us that pushback, and that's normal. For some people, they don't have much of it at all because they're open to the work and they're excited. For other people, there will be like a specific wound they get really stuck on. And so we start really general. So we would say something like, it is possible to be loved. And if you still don't feel resonance with that, we can say it is possible for all people to be loved, and look for other evidence of other people you've seen with similar characteristics, build love, connect with people, create that loving relationship. And we can start there. And what we'll see is generally around day 7, people will start to have like a little bit of that resonance and feel good about it. And when we start feeling like, oh, okay, this is believable for me now, I can see myself coming into resonance, that's where we stretch again. We say, okay, it is possible for me to be loved, not just all people to be loved. And then we stretch again. And the other thing too is people don't have to come up with like 10 new things every day. We can hack this system. We can record it in our phone and we can just listen to it back and feel about it for 21 days if we want to shortcut and streamline the process. But it's just the repetition and emotion that we really need there with that imagery.
I want to go a step deeper and make it even more tactical, because I want you listening to try this. So if you're in the camp where you cannot come up with any emotion or imagery around I am lovable or I am loved or I'm capable of love, or what was it that you said?
I'm worthy of love. All people are worthy of love.
Yeah. So if you're in that camp of I'm worthy of love, you can't even get that for yourself. And you go, okay, I'll do the statement, it is possible that other people are capable of loving.
Yes.
Do you then find 8 sort of images, could even be memes, of people that are hugging, or of people that are greeting their dog, or of people that are buying somebody the coffee behind them in line, these kind of acts of love that you have seen other people do. And if you take those 10 and you either write them down every day and kind of visualize that moment, or you make a recording of yourself saying, here are 10 examples that love is possible, that people are capable of love or worthy of love. And then you describe them, and you do that over and over and over. When you start to feel the momentum, then you say, you know what? It's possible that I'm worthy of love.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And actually it's really interesting because there's 3 ways the subconscious mind gets programmed. So what we see repetitively or what's modeled to us, what we hear repetitively, and what our firsthand experiences are. So if we can't find firsthand experiences, if we can't find times we heard something, then we can actually go and see like what's modeled around us, and just the exposure and proximity to that through repetition over time will absolutely do the trick.
Thais, I just love that people can use that simple tool to begin to change their attachment style. And I also love knowing I can change my attachment style, because what you're offering is not only this awesome framework, but you're also offering a simple way for any one of us to reprogram our subconscious mind. That is so cool. And I also want to thank you because you have put together a special bonus meditation for the listeners of the Mel Robbins podcast. And that is so generous of you. And let me just tell you a little bit about this meditation so you know what to expect. So Thais recorded this meditation as a gift to you. It is designed to be listened to 21 days in a row. And here's how you can find it. It's the very next episode of the Mel Robbins podcast. We also put a link in the show notes. But the title is this: Daily Meditation. Listen for 21 days to reprogram your subconscious. And again, it is already there waiting for you right after this episode. And it's designed to be listened to for 21 days in a row. It's one of the tools that Thais uses with her private clients, and it's something that you can use and share in your own life. Thais, can you just give the person listening a sense of the impact of this meditation?
Yes. And so you can shed all the stuff we've been carrying for so long. I mean, sometimes we have all these like wounds and they show up everywhere and they interfere in so many different areas, but to actually drop them and to not have them they're popping up and you have to cope all the time and backtrack and apologize, like to not live like that is very freeing.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed that video, by God, please subscribe because I don't want you to miss a thing. Thank you so much for being here. We've got so much amazing stuff coming. Thank you so much for sending this stuff to your friends and your family. I love you. We create these videos for you. So make sure you subscribe. Mwah.